The snow had begun before noon, and it had not stopped. Wah! It came down thin at first, the sort that melts on the shoulder of a coat and leaves a dark spot, and then it thickened until the hedges lost their shape and the lane lost its edges, and the whole country went quiet in the way it only goes quiet in a hard winter. Eloanrook walked in the middle of the road, because the middle was the only part she could still find. Her shoes were thin. They had been good shoes once, and she had mended them twice, and now the left one took in water at the seam with every second step. She did not look back at the house. She had made herself a promise about that on the front step, and she meant to keep it. Skane House stood on the rise behind her, with its windows lit yellow against the coming dark, and if she saw the light, she would want to go back, and there was nothing to go back to. So she walked. The wind came across the open field on her right and took the loose snow off the top of the drifts and threw it sideways into her face, and she turned her cheek against it and kept walking, and against her chest, wrapped in everything she owned, the child began to cry again. That crying was the best sound in the world. She knew that. She knew what the other sound meant. She had been turned out at 3:30, and there had been no shouting, which was the part she kept returning to. Mistress Sable Skeen had come into the back passage with her keys still in her hand, and had spoken in the same flat voice she used for the ordering of the fish. The child could not stay. A house of respectable women could not keep a child of no name in the linen room and pretend it was charity, not with the talk already begun in the village. She had been given a choice, and she had been given it once. The child would go to the parish at Brackenford in the morning, and Eloan would keep her place and her wages and her character. Or she would take the child and go. Eloan had asked for 1 hour to think. She had not needed 1 hour. She had needed the hour to sew. She had gone up to the linen room, and she had sat on the edge of the narrow bed, and she had taken her needle, and she had opened the hem of the child's gray blanket, 4 inches of it, and she had put a thing inside it that she had carried for 2 years, and she had sewn the hem shut again with the small tight stitches her mother had taught her. Then she had wrapped the child and taken her shawl and her comb, and the 2 shillings that were her own, and nothing else, and she had come down the back stairs, and Mistress Skeen had been waiting by the door with the keys still in her hand. "You are a foolish girl," Mistress Skeen had said. "I am a girl who gave her word," Eloan had said. The door had shut. That had been the whole of it. Now the light was going out of the sky and the snow was coming harder, and the road to Brackenford was 7 miles, and she had walked, perhaps 2 of them. She could feel the cold in the bones of her hands. She shifted the child higher against her shoulder and bent her head over her and made a small warm place out of her own breath and her own body, and she walked. Linnet was 2 years old. She had her mother's fair hair, and she did not have her mother's eyes. She had been hot to the touch since the middle of the day, and Eloan had told herself it was teeth, and had known it was not teeth. Now the crying thinned out, and then it stopped. Eloan kept walking for perhaps 20 steps before she understood that it had stopped. She stopped in the road. She put her hand up under the shawl and laid 2 fingers against the child's cheek. It was hot. It was very hot, and the child did not turn her face into the hand, the way she always did, the way she had done every single time since she was small enough to fit in the crook of an arm. She turned her head slowly and heavily, as though it belonged to somebody else, and she made a sound that was not a word and not a cry, and then she was quiet again. Eloan looked up the road. She looked back down it. There was no house in either direction, and no light, and no cart, and no living thing at all except a single crow going over low and black against the white sky, and the light was going, and the child in her arms was burning. She did not pray. She had stopped praying on a wet step at Fen Cross 2 winters ago, and had never quite started again. She stood in the road with the snow coming down on her uncovered head, and made herself think. And thinking was hard, because the cold had got into that too. And then she remembered the kiln. There was an old lime kiln half a mile off the road on the Wenmere side, in the hollow below the beech wood. She had seen it as a girl when she came out this way for cobnuts. It was built into the bank, a great stone mouth like an oven, and the vault went back into the hill and was dry. And stone that has burned lime for 100 years holds a memory of warmth the way nothing else does. She left the road. The field beyond the gate was untracked, and the snow came over the tops of her shoes at once, and she felt it go in and settle around her ankles and begin its slow work. She held the child with both arms, and she went down the slope with her feet sliding under her, and she did not fall, and at the bottom she came through the gap in the thorn hedge and saw the black arch of the kiln mouth in the bank below the beeches. There were footprints in the snow going in. They were fresh. They had not yet begun to soften at the edges. They were the prints of a man's boots, large, splayed, a little at the heel, and there were no prints coming out again. Eloin looked at the footprints a long moment. Then she looked at the sky, which was nearly dark, and at the country behind her, which had nothing in it at all, and she went in. The kiln mouth was taller than a man. Inside, the noise of the wind stopped as though a door had been shut on it, and the sudden quiet was so complete that she heard her own heart. It was warmer, not warm, warmer. The floor was dry stone and old ash, and it did not shine with frost the way the field had done. Further back, where the vault narrowed, there was a red glow the size of a hand. A voice came out of the dark beside the glow. "Stand still," it said, "and let me look at you." Eloin stood still. Her arms had begun to shake, and she could not tell whether it was the cold or the weight or the fear, and she thought that it did not matter which. "I have nothing worth taking," she said. "I can see that," the voice said. "Come to the fire before the pair of you go stiff." He was an old man. Quote, when she came close enough to see him, by the small light he was sitting on a folded sack, with his back against the stone, and he had a face like a walnut, and a white stubble of beard and one eye that looked at her and one that did not. There was a fire the size of a soup plate built up in a ring of stones, and beside it a battered tin can, and beside that a sack with something heavy in it that he moved behind him with his foot as she came near, without hurry. "Sit," he said. "Not there. There. The stone is warmer where the draft does not run." She sat where he pointed. She could not seem to make her hands let go of the child. "Give her here," he said. "No," Eloin said. "Then open the wrap and let the heat at her, girl, because you are holding her like a parcel, and the heat cannot get in." Eloin opened the shawl. The old man leaned forward and looked at the child's face in the firelight, and his one good eye went narrow, and he sat back. "How long has she been like that?" "Since noon." He said nothing for a moment. Then he set the tin can in the embers and brought out a folded horse blanket, brown, worn through at one corner, and smelling strongly of horse, and pushed it across the floor towards her with his boot. "Wrap her in that. Not tight. Wet a cloth in the can when it warms, and lay it on the back of her neck and the inside of her wrists, and change it when it dries. Not cold water. Cold water shocks them, and the fever climbs after." "You know a great deal about it," Eloin said. "I buried 4, the old man said. He said it the way another man would say the road was bad. He put 2 sticks on the fire and settled his back against the stone. They worked at it a long time without much talk. Eloin tore a strip from her petticoat and wet it and laid it on the child's neck, and the child's eyes came half open and closed again. The old man built the fire up until it threw shadows into the roof of the vault, and the stone at their backs began to give the heat back the way stone does, slowly and long after the fire has done its part. Somewhere, in the middle of the night, Linnet began to sweat. Eloin felt it start at the hairline first, a dampness where there had been dry burning skin, and she put her mouth against the child's forehead and held it there and shut her eyes. "You may leave off the cloth now," the old man said from the dark. "She is cooler. She is cooler." Eloin sat back against the warm stone with the child against her chest, and she found that she was crying, and she was quiet about it, and she stopped after a little while, because it did nothing for the child. The old man had the grace to look at the fire. "Where did all this wood come from?" she said at last, when her voice would hold the stack at the back of the vault. "There is dry kindling in a box with a lid on it, and 2 more blankets and an oilcloth on the ledge above your head, and I have known there to be a crock of oats up there in a bad month. Who leaves it? That is the question, is it not?" the old man said. "I have used this kiln 11 winters. It is never empty, and I have never seen a soul bring so much as a stick. Ask in Brackenford, and they will tell you it is the parish. It is not the parish. I have known the parish 40 years, and the parish would want you to be grateful where somebody could see it." He turned his head, and the firelight caught the eye that did not look at her. "Whoever it is," he said, "they do not want the credit. That is rarer than the oats." Later, when the fire had settled, and the old man had begun to snore against the stone, Aloan did a thing she had done perhaps 20 times in 2 years, always alone, always in the dark. She turned back the corner of the blanket and found the place in the hem where the stitches were newer than the rest. She pressed it between her finger and her thumb until she felt the hard, round shape inside the cloth. She held it there a moment. Then she smoothed the hem down and folded the blanket back over the child and put her cheek against the small, warm head, and she said out loud, but very quietly, into the dark of the kiln, the same 6 words she had said in a doorway 2 winters ago and had never once taken back. "I gave my word. I keep it." She meant to stay awake. She did not. She woke to gray light in the kiln mouth and the fire gone down to a red eye and the old man gone. In his place, folded neatly on the warm stone, were both of the blankets from the ledge, and the tin can had been filled with clean snow and set where it would melt slow, and there was nothing else at all to show that anybody had been there, and she thought as she looked at it that she had not once asked his name, and he had not once asked hers. Then she heard the horses. There were several of them, and they were moving at a walk, and the sound came down into the hollow the way sound does in snow, flattened and close and hard to place. She got up with the child in her arms. Her legs were stiff, and the wet shoe had frozen, and she had to stand a moment before she could trust her feet. She went to the kiln mouth and looked out. The snow had stopped in the night. The hollow was white and blue and completely still, and the beechwood above it stood black and bare, and coming down along the edge of the wood were 4 riders and 2 men on foot with long staves, working along the line of the hedge, stopping, looking, going on. They were searching. There was no mistaking what they were doing. Aloan stepped back into the shadow of the vault. She thought about who searches a hedge line at first light in a foot of snow. Not for a poacher. Nobody turns out 4 horses for a poacher. They were looking for something they expected to be lying down. Then the riders came round the curve of the hollow, and the man in front lifted his head and saw the smoke. It was the thinnest smoke in the world, the last breath of a fire that had burned all night, going up blue and straight out of the kiln mouth in the still air. He saw it, and he turned his horse without a word and came down the slope, and the others came after him. She had time to think about running, and to understand that she could not run. She stood where she was, holding the child high against her collarbone, and the old horse blanket around them both, and her hair uncombed and one shoe frozen, and she waited. The horse stopped 10 feet from her. It was a heavy gray, with snow packed in the hair of its fetlocks, and it stood blowing white in the cold. The man on it was in a black riding coat, with the collar up, and his hat was gone or he had never worn one, and there was snow in his dark hair and along the shoulders of the coat, and he had the look of a man who had been out in it since long before daylight. He did not speak at once. He looked at her, and then at the bundle on her shoulder, and then past her into the dark of the kiln, and then at the ground in front of the kiln mouth where the snow was trodden, and she understood that he was reading it, all of it, quickly and completely, the way she read a torn hem. "Is she alive?" he said. Yes. He got down. He did it easily, the way a big man does when he has done it 50,000 times, and he came forward 3 steps and stopped, which she noticed because there was no reason on earth for a man like that to stop. "May I?" he said. Aloan did not know what he meant for a moment. Then she did. She turned her shoulders slightly and folded back the corner of the blanket from the child's face. He pulled the glove off his right hand with his teeth. She saw his hand. It was not the hand she expected. The back of it was marked from the knuckle to the wrist with a long old burn scar, shining and puckered and white against the cold red of the rest, and the nails were cut short and square like a working man's. He laid the back of that hand against Lynette's forehead, lightly, and left it there, and looked away at nothing while he did it, the way people do when they are listening through their skin. "Fever," he said, "broken or breaking." In the night he took his hand away. He put the glove back on. "There is a physician at Cadenhall," he said. "There is a fire in every room of it and a woman who has raised 6 of her own. You will come up with us and let him look at her. I have no money for a physician. I did not ask you for money." Behind him, another rider had come down into the hollow and reined in, and one of the men on foot stood at the top of the bank with his staff, and nobody spoke. The gray horse shifted, and the snow creaked under it. "I will not go into a house where I am not wanted," Eloan said. "I have just come out of one." Something happened in his face. It was very small. She had seen a great deal of it in her life. That particular small thing, the moment when a person hears the shape of a story and does not ask for the rest of it. "Then hear the whole of the offer," he said, "and answer it after. My carriage is on the Brackenford Road because it could not get through the gate. There are hot bricks in it. You may sit in it and let the physician come out to you, and if you wish to go on to Brackenford afterwards, it will take you to Brackenford, and I will not come near you again. That is the offer. It has no second part." "Why?" Eloan said. "Because I have been out since 4 o'clock this morning, looking for a shepherd's boy who did not come home, and I have not found him, and I am not going to ride past a live child in a hole in a bank and call the day a loss." He said it flatly, without any music in it at all, and it was that flatness that made her believe him. She looked at him properly, for the first time. He was perhaps 35. His face gave nothing away, and it was not an unkind face. And there was gray coming at the temple on one side only, and the eyes under the dark brows were a pale brown, almost amber, and they were very steady. She had seen those eyes before. She had seen them from a distance of 2 feet in a doorway, on a wet October evening 2 winters ago, when they had been the eyes of a man asking her a question 3 times and getting the same answer 3 times. She saw. The moment it happened to him, he had begun to turn away towards the horse, and he stopped, with his hand already on the rein. He turned back. He looked at her face, at her hair, at her face again. His jaw set. The steadiness went out of the amber eyes, and something else came into them. And it was not anger, and it was worse than anger, because it was recognition. "You," he said. Lauenrook stood in the mouth of the kiln with the child on her shoulder and did not look away. "Your Grace," she said. "2 winters ago," said Corvin Hale, Duke of Wenmere, "you stood in a doorway at Fen Cross, and I asked you where my brother had gone, and you told me you would not say. I asked you a 2nd time. I asked you a 3rd time in the rain like a beggar. And you would not say, 'No,' Eloan said. 'I would not.'" He came 1 step closer. The horse's breath went up white between them. "And now," he said, "I find you at first light in a lime kiln on my own land, 7 miles from anywhere, in the snow, with a child." He looked at the bundle on her shoulder. She saw his eyes go over the small, fair head and the worn gray blanket and the hem of it, and she felt the hard, round shape sewn into that hem as though it had begun, quietly, to burn. "Whose child is that?" he said. The Lowen felt the cold come up through the frozen shoe and into her leg, and she stood very straight against it. "She is mine to keep," she said. "That is not what I asked. It is what I am able to answer." The Duke of Wenmere did not move and did not raise his voice. That was somehow worse than if he had done both. "You are standing on my land," he said, "with a child you will not name, 7 miles from the nearest parish, having spent a night in a kiln. Any magistrate in the county would ask you the same question and would not be as patient about it." "Then send for a magistrate," Alowan said. "I do not want a magistrate. I want an answer." "You wanted one from me at Fen Cross," she said, "and you did not get that one either." She had not meant to say it. It came out of her the way a splinter comes out, from a place that had been sore 2 years, and she saw it go into him. "Say his name," he said. "No. Say it. You did not say it in the doorway. Say it now." And she found that she could not. She had not said it aloud once in 2 years, not to any living soul, not even to herself in the dark of a linen room, and a thing you leave unsaid that long grows over like a wound, and closed is not the same as healed. There had been a house at Fen Cross with a green door and a bad chimney. Alowan had gone there at 19 as companion to a young woman named Amaret Fane, who had no fortune and no family left, and who was the gentlest and least sensible person Alowan had ever known. They had been happy there, in a small way. Amaret sang badly, and often. She kept a jackdaw that stole thimbles. She read novels aloud in the evenings and did the voices, and when she laughed, she put her hand flat on her chest as though to hold something in. In the spring, a gentleman began to call. He was young and fair, and he had a way of arriving at the wrong hour and apologizing for it charmingly. He gave his name as Sabien. He did not for some weeks give any other. Alowan had known within a month what he was, because his boots were made for him, and his coat was made for him, and his gloves were not being new and cheap and bought in a hurry to look like less than he was. They were married in the August, quietly and properly, with the curate and 2 witnesses and no announcement anywhere, and Alowan signed the register with a shaking hand, and did not understand until much later why the shaking had been the sensible part of her. There was a reason for the quiet. The reason had a name, and the name was not the Duke of Wenmere. It was Lady Adeline Hale, who was the aunt who had raised both brothers when their mother died, and who had told Sabien in a room in London that if he married a companion with no fortune she would see the thing undone and the girl put out of the county with her character gone, and that his brother would do exactly as she said because his brother always had. Alowan had not known then whether that last part was true. She had only known that Amaret believed it, and Amaret was the one who would be put out. In the October, Sabien went away. He went to arrange a passage and a house and a living of his own, so that when he brought his wife home, he would be bringing her somewhere, and not merely bringing her. He told Alowan only this, standing in the yard with his horse already turned, that if anyone came asking, she was to say nothing at all, and that he would write, and that it would be 6 weeks. Amaret had been 3 months carrying by then. She had asked Alowan to swear it. Not the promise about the address. The other one. "Swear to me," she had said, "that whatever happens, whatever they say to you, you will not give my child to that woman. She will take her and call it kindness, and I will be dead of it before I am dead of anything else. Swear it." "I swear it," Alowan had said. 11 days later, a man came to Fen Cross in the rain. She opened the green door herself because the girl was out. He was tall and travel-stained, and he had a hand on the doorframe as though he had been riding a long time, and he asked quite civilly where his brother had gone. She had said she could not say. He asked again. He said he was not angry, that he did not care about the marriage, that he cared only about finding him, and she heard the word marriage and thought, he knows, and if he knows, then Lady Adeline knows. And behind her, in the house, Amaret was sitting by the fire, with her hand flat on her chest. She had said she could not say. He had asked a third time. He had stood in the rain off the step to do it, which she had thought at the time was a trick, and had not been a trick. And he had said, "Please," and she had shut the door. That was the whole of it. That was the doorway. Sabian Hale died at Cadiz in the January of a fever, and the letter took 2 months to come, and by then Amoret was too near her time to be told, and was told anyway, because Elowen would not lie to her, and was never afterwards sure that had been right. Linnet was born in the March. Amoret lived 4 days. She held the child once, and she had strength for 1 sentence, and the sentence was not about Sabian, and was not about God, and was about a promise. Elowen had taken the ring off Amoret's finger before the women came to lay her out, because she knew what would happen to a ring in a house with no money in it, and she had sewn it into the hem of a blanket, and she had taken the child and gone to Skene House, and said the child was her sister's, and been believed for 2 years. Snow came off a beech branch above the hollow, and fell with a soft collapsing sound. "I will not say his name," Elowen said, "because I promised his wife I would say nothing, and she is dead, and a promise to the dead is the only kind that costs anything to keep." The Duke stood very still. "His wife," he said. Elowen shut her eyes for 1 moment, which was the closest thing to a mistake she had made all winter. "I have said more than I meant to. I will say nothing else. Send for your magistrate." He did not send for a magistrate. He spoke over his shoulder without taking his eyes off her. "Rennick, ride to the road. Tell them to bring the carriage as near the gate as it will come, and tell them to put in every hot brick they have." Then he looked back at her. "You may sit in that carriage, and say nothing to me from here to Cattenhall," he said. "You may say nothing to me for the rest of your life. But that child has been in the snow all night, and I am not going to stand in a field arguing about a name while she does it twice." The carriage was black and old and beautifully kept, and it smelled of leather and warm brick. He put both rugs into her hands through the door and shut it, and did not get in. And she heard him mount the gray horse and go on ahead, and she understood that he had given her the whole carriage, so that she would not have to sit opposite him, and she sat in the corner with the child on her lap, and did not know what to do with that. Cattenhall stood at the end of a drive of limes with the snow lying unmarked under them. It was not the largest house Elowen had ever seen. It was the most solid. Gray stone, low and long, put there by people who had intended to stay, with smoke going up from a great many chimneys, and the whole front of it already swept clear that morning by somebody who had been up early. The carriage did not stop at the front. It went round to the side, and stopped by a door in a wall, and a woman came out of that door before the wheels had finished turning. She was 50 or thereabouts, wide and quick, with flour on one wrist. She opened the carriage door herself. "Give her to me," she said. "No," Elowen said. The woman looked at her for a second and a half. "Quite right," she said. "Then come in and bring her and mind the step. It is iced. I am Mistress Peel. I have had 6 and buried none, which is luck and not skill. A child that has broken a fever wants warm milk in a dark room and not one single visitor, and if his grace comes in I will put him out again." She did put him out again. Elowen heard it happen through a door 20 minutes later, the low voice and then the flat one, and then a pause, and then the sound of a man walking away down a stone passage, and Mistress Peel came back and wiping her hands and did not mention it. The physician came at 11. He was a spare, gray man named Nye, with cold hands that he warmed at the fire before he used them, which Elowen noticed and thought better of him for. He listened to the child's chest a long time. He asked what had been done in the night, and when Elowen told him he raised his eyebrows, and said, "Whoever told you, that knew his business," and Elowen said he was a poacher in a lime kiln, and Nye said he had learned more from one shepherd in Cumberland than from 2 years of lectures, and was not ashamed to say so. The fever was broken. The chest was clear enough. What the child wanted was warmth, milk, and a week of not being carried anywhere. "A week," said Elowen. "A week," said Nye, "and I will come again on the 3rd day." He packed his bag and paused with it in his hand. "When did you last eat?" he said. Elowen thought about it and discovered she could not answer. Nye went out without another word. 10 minutes later, a tray came up, and Mistress Peel stood over her with her arms folded until she had eaten, and Elowen ate more than she meant to, and was ashamed of how her hands shook doing it. In the afternoon, the Duke sent word, asking whether she would come down to the library. It came as a question by way of Mistress Peel, and Mistress Peel delivered it exactly as a question, with the words, "if she is willing," left in it, which told Elowen that they were words he had used. She went down. The library at Cadenhall had a low fire, and a great many books, and a long window looking out at the White Park, and he was standing at the window when she came in, and he turned around. "Sit if you like," he said, "or stand." "I would rather you did whichever one lets you hear me." "I will stand." "Then I will stand as well." They stood. "The physician says a week," he said. "You will have the room you are in, and Mistress Peel, and whatever the kitchen has, for that week, and for as many weeks after it as the child needs. And there is no condition on that, and no price on it, and nothing to sign." I want that understood before anything else is said, because I think you have spent a long time being offered things with a second part, and I want you to know from the beginning that this has none. Elowen said nothing. "There is a thing I must say, and I will say it badly," he went on. "When I came to Fen Cross, I was 2 weeks behind my brother. I've been told what my aunt said to him in London. I came to tell him she did not speak for me, and never had, and that he could bring his wife to this house, and I would put the pair of them at the top of the table and let the county say what it liked. That was the whole of my errand. I did not say it to you at the door, because I did not think you would believe me, and I have had 2 winters to consider whether that was the reason, or whether I was too proud to explain myself to a girl in a doorway, and I have come to think it was the second." Elowen found that her throat had closed. "You had no way of knowing," she said. "Nobody in your place would have." "No," he said. "Nobody would. But I have watched a great many people be given no reason, and managed to be right anyway, and I was not one of them." He put his hand on the back of a chair. "I am not asking you for the name," he said. "I have worked it out. I worked it out in the field, and, I worked it out, and we can both go on pretending I have not, and I will pretend for as long as you need me to. But you are going to be under my roof for a week, and I will not have you lying awake wondering when I am going to come at you for it. I am not going to come at you for it. If you tell me, it will be because you have decided to. And if I never decide to, then I will never know," he said. "And I will have to bear it, and I have borne worse." There was a silence in the library. A log turned over in the grate. "There is one thing I will ask, and you may refuse it," Elowen said. "Ask. Do not write to your aunt that we are here." Something crossed his face, very fast. "She is already coming," he said. "She comes at the turn of the year. She comes every year. She will be here in 9 days." Elowen kept her chin up and her hand still, and she thought about a woman with a hand flat on her chest, and she said, very evenly, "Then I will be gone in 8." The room they had given her was up 2 flights at the back, and it had a small grate and a deep window and a bed with more blankets on it than Elowen had owned in her life. She lay awake in it that first night listening to a house that made entirely different noises from the one she was used to. And in the morning Lynette woke up hungry, which was the best news of the winter, and by the 3rd day she was well enough to be bored, and a bored child in a large house is a force of nature. The house was the strangest part. She had expected to be looked at, and she was not. She had expected the servants to be cold, and they were not, and that was harder, because there was no telling whether it was kindness or orders. The linen was changed on the 2nd morning, although it had been slept in once, and Elowen, who had counted sheets in 3 houses, and knew to a penny what that linen was, folded the used one out of habit, and then stood in the middle of the room holding it, and did not know where in the world to put it down. She learned the house through her feet. The stone in the passages was cold enough to feel through a stocking, and the wood in the upper rooms was not. The whole west side smelled faintly of apples, because there was a loft over the still room where they were laid out on racks, and she found it by following the smell, and stood in the doorway a long time and did not go in, because going in was what a person who belonged there would do. She did not eat with anybody. On the second day, Mistress Peel said the kitchen sat down at 1 and left the end of the sentence open like a door, and Eloan looked at the floor and said she would do very well upstairs, and Mistress Peel said, "That is what I thought you would say," and sent up a plate. The Duke she saw twice, once from the window, riding out at first light and coming back at dusk without having found anything, and once in the passage outside the still room, where they nearly walked into one another, and he stepped back against the wall to give her the width of it, and said good morning, and nothing else at all. He put his hands behind his back when he spoke to her. She thought at first it was disdain. By the third day, she understood that a man who knows he is large, and knows that the woman in front of him was lately put out of a house in the snow, will find something to do with his hands. It was Linnet who broke it, because Linnet did not know she was supposed to be careful. She had been carried down to the warm end of the kitchen passage that afternoon, Mistress Peel holding that a well child kept in a sick room. A sick child by Friday. She was sitting on a folded rug with a wooden spoon and a tin lid, which she considered an excellent arrangement, and the Duke came through on his way from the yard with his coat over his arm, and snow still on his boots. He stopped because there was a child in the way. Linnet looked up at him. She looked at him for a long moment in the frank and shameless manner of the very young. Then she held out the wooden spoon. Eloan, from the doorway, did not move. He did not laugh, and he did not say any of the things people say to children in place of speaking to them. He put his coat on the bench. He went down onto one knee on the cold flags, which is not a small thing for a man of his size to do casually, and took the spoon and turned it over and looked at it with complete seriousness. "That is a good spoon," he said. Linnet took it back and gave him the tin lid instead. "That is a better one," he said. He handed it back. He got up. He picked up his coat and went on down the passage. And he did not look at Eloan in the doorway as he passed her, and it was only when he had gone round the corner that she understood he had known she was standing there the whole time and had deliberately not made her be part of it. On the fourth day she got out of the room. Eloan had been asleep in the chair for a quarter of an hour, which was the first quarter of an hour she had slept in daylight since the summer. She woke because the door was open. She went down the passage with her heart going hard, found the landing empty, and went down the stairs 2 at a time, and at the bottom of the stairs was the long hall with the black and white floor and the cold light coming in, and standing in the middle of it in a nightgown and one stocking was Linnet. She was not lost. She was not frightened. She was standing perfectly still, with her head tipped back, looking up. Eloan came down the last steps and stopped. There were portraits along the hall. Eloan had walked past them twice a day for 4 days, with her eyes on the floor, because looking at them was a way of being reminded, and she had had enough of that. Now she looked where the child was looking. It was a young man in a blue coat, standing beside a horse with his hand in its mane, and the painter had caught something loose and unfinished about him, as though he had agreed to stand still as a favor, and would not agree much longer. He was fair. He had a wide mouth. He was perhaps 22, and he was looking out of the frame with an expression of enormous and completely unearned cheerfulness. Linnet put up one hand towards the picture, the whole arm, the way children do. "Dada," she said. The hall was very quiet. She said it again, patiently, the way she said things she considered obvious. She was not yet 3. She had a word for the pot and a word for milk and a word for the jackdaw in the story. And this was a word she had never had any use for in her life. And Eloan stood at the foot of the stairs and could not breathe. She did not know how long she stood there. Long enough. Then she heard the sound behind her, which was a very small sound, the sound of a boot heel on stone that is stopped in the middle of a step, and she turned round. Duke of Wenmere was standing in the doorway of the library with a book in his hand, and he was not looking at the child. And he was not looking at the portrait of his brother. He was looking at Eloin's face. He did not ask. That was the thing Eloin could not get past. Afterwards, he came down the hall. He picked Lynette up off the cold floor without any ceremony at all, the way you pick up a chair that is in the wrong place, and he handed her across to Eloin, and he said, "She has one stocking on, she will want the other." And then he went back into the library and shut the door. He left her alone with it for the rest of that day and all the next. On the 6th evening, he found her on the back stairs. "Will you come up and see something?" he said. "It is not far, and it is not important, and you may say no." They went up 2 flights and along a passage she had not been down, and he opened a plain door at the end of it, and it was the apple loft. It ran the whole width of the west side of the house under the roof, and the racks went away into the dark in rows, every one covered with apples laid singly, so that no fruit touched another, and the smell was so thick and so sweet and so much like the inside of a memory that Eloin stopped in the doorway with her hand on the frame. "I know you have been standing outside this door," he said. "I have not been. You have. Nettie saw you twice, and told Mistress Peel, and Mistress Peel told me, and I have spent 2 days working out why a woman would look at a room full of apples and not go into it, and the only answer I could arrive at was that you did not think you were allowed." He set the lamp down on the end of a rack. "So I am telling you that you are allowed, and now I will go away and you may stand in it as long as you like." He got as far as the door. "Your Grace," Eloin said. He stopped. "Do not go away," she said. There were 2 stools at the end of the loft where the pickers sat to sort. He brought them over, and there was a stone jug of apple water by the wall which he poured himself, and there were no cups but the tin one the pickers kept on a nail, so he filled it, and gave it to her first, and she drank, and it was cold and sharp, and tasted of the smell of the room. "In this room," he said, "I would rather you called me Corvin. Outside it, whatever you please. Why only in this room?" "Because I am about to tell you something that a duke cannot say and a man can." She waited. He turned the cup around in his hands. When the letter came from Cadiz, he said, "I did nothing." The lamp hissed. There were 3 weeks between the letter and the funeral, and I did not once ride to Fen Cross. I told myself the house would be shut up. I told myself she would have gone to her people. I asked my aunt whether there was anything to be done for anybody, and my aunt said there was nothing and no one, and I knew what my aunt was worth on that question, and I let the answer stand because it cost me nothing. I have gone over it every winter since, and there is no version in which I come out well. I was not deceived. I let myself be told. He set the cup down on the floor. I am not saying this so that you will forgive me. I am saying it because you have been in my house 8 days, believing you are the one who has something to be ashamed of, and I am not going to let you walk out of here on Friday, still believing that while I sit in the library with the door shut. Eloin looked at the rows of apples going away into the dark. "May I ask you a question?" he said. "You may. When she died, why did you not come here?" She did not answer at once. He did not fill it. He sat with his forearms on his knees and looked at the floor and let the silence go on, and she found that the room was helping her, because it is easier to say a hard thing in the dark with a smell in it. "Because I had nothing to bring you," she said at last. "You had my brother's child. I had a baby of 4 days in a ring, and my word for it. If I had come to this door and said what I had come to say, one of 2 things would have happened. Either you would have believed me, and your aunt would have arrived within the week, and I would have been paid off and sent away, and the child would have been given to whichever family she chose, which is the thing I swore on a dead woman's bed would not happen. Or you would not have believed me, and I would have been the servant girl who came to Cadenhall with a child and a story, and I would have been finished, and so would she." He said nothing. "I have thought about it a great deal," she said. There was never a version of walking up that drive that ended with me still holding her. So I did not walk up the drive. The lamp hissed again. Somewhere below them a door shut, and someone laughed in the kitchen. I was 19 when I went to Fencross and said, "I have been in 3 houses since I was 15, and in every one of them I have been a useful thing. When the linen is short, you send the useful thing away. When there is talk, you send it away. I am not complaining. It is how it is arranged, and I have never expected it to be arranged differently. But I made one promise in my life that was mine, that nobody set me and nobody paid me for, and I have kept it for 2 years, at the cost of everything else I had, and it is the only thing I own." She looked at him. "So when you ask me why I did not come here, that is the answer. I would rather be nothing and keep it than be comfortable and give it up." Corvin Hale sat very still on a 3-legged stool in the smell of apples and did not speak for a long time. Then he said, "I want to ask you for something, and I want to say first what it is not." "Say it then." "It is not about the child. I gave you my word in the library, and I meant it, and I will not go behind it. And it is not anything I can say to you while you are sleeping under my roof and eating out of my kitchen, because a man who holds the roof over a woman's head cannot ask her for so much as the time of day and call the answer honest. That is not modesty. That is simply true, and you know it better than I do." "I know it," she said. "Then here is the whole of it. You leave on Friday. When you are gone and settled and eating your own bread, may I write to you? Write to me. Letters. Nothing in them that could shame you if they were read out in a public street. You may answer or not. If you do not answer twice, I will stop, and I will not ask why. And if you would rather I did not begin, you have only to say the word no. Now, in this room, and I will never mention it again as long as I live, and I will still send the card to Brackenford on Friday with everything the child needs in it." Alowan sat holding the cold cup in her lap. "Why?" she said. "Because I have spent 2 winters thinking about a girl in a doorway who would not tell me a thing I wanted very badly to know," he said. "And I have been in a room with you 8 days, and I have understood at last that she was not being obstinate. She was being the only honest person in the county. I should like to hear from her occasionally." "You may write," said Alowan. She left Cadden Hall on the Friday, the 8th day, in the cart, with the child and 2 blankets and a basket she had argued about and lost. Brackenford took her in the way villages do, slowly and with questions. She got a room over the harness makers for 1 and 6 a week, and work within 9 days, because a woman who can turn a collar is never quite without it, and by the middle of January she was mending for 4 households, and it was not enough, and it was hers. The first letter came on the 3rd day. It was about a hinge. "There was a gate at Cadden Hall," he wrote, "that had shrieked for 9 years, and that morning the smith had hung it on a new pin, and it had opened without a sound, and he had stood in the yard feeling obscurely cheated. He thought she might understand why. She read it 4 times, and then put it in the tin where she kept her thread. She wrote back that evening. She said that when a thing has made a noise for 9 years, the noise stops being a fault and starts being how you know the gate is yours, and that her mother had a kettle with a crack in the base that sang when it boiled and had been thrown out by an aunt as unsafe, and that nothing had ever boiled properly in that house again." His next letter came within 4 days, and after that they came twice a week. He wrote in the 2nd week that his aunt had been turned back at Appleby by the roads and would not now come north until February, and that he had read the letter telling him so 4 times and could not account for his own relief. He wrote that they had found the shepherd's boy in a hayrick at Ketteridge. 2 days, a broken ankle, thin and cross and entirely alive, and that he had ridden home from Ketteridge at a walk in the dark and could not explain to anybody why he was in no hurry to arrive. He wrote about a tenant, a book he had given up on twice, and a mare that would not be caught by anybody but a boy of 9. She wrote about the harness maker's dog, and about a woman in the village who could not read, and had begun coming on Thursdays so that Ilowen could read her son's letters aloud, and about Linnet, who had lately decided that the word for snow was please. Neither of them wrote one line about money. Neither of them wrote the name of the child or the name of the dead man, and neither of them wrote a single word that could not have been read aloud in the street, and both of them knew exactly what they were doing. She knew what it was. That was the part she could not afford. She said it out loud to herself once in the room over the harness maker's, standing with a letter in her hand and the child asleep behind her in the rain going across the window. She said, "This is the only thing in your life that costs you nothing, and you are going to lose it, and you know when." Then she folded the letter into the tin with the others, and she went on writing them, because she had decided a long time ago that she would rather have a thing and lose it than never take it out of the box. Lady Adeline Hale came into Brackenford on the 2nd of February in a traveling carriage with 2 footmen up behind, and by 4 o'clock that afternoon, a boy had brought a card up the harness maker's stairs. It was not a card. It was a note, and it was not a request, and Ilowen read it standing at the top of the stairs. With her thimble still on, she went the next morning. She was received in the parlor of the White Hart, which Lady Adeline had evidently taken entire and had rearranged to suit herself. There was a good fire. There was a woman of about 60 by it in gray silk, with a straight back and a face that had been handsome and had decided to be something else instead, and she had the same pale amber eyes as her nephew, and nothing else of him at all. She did not stand. "Sit down, Miss Rook." Ilowen sat. Tea was poured. Ilowen took the cup because refusing it would have been a small thing, and she wanted her small things kept back for later. "You are the young woman who was found in a lime kiln," said Lady Adeline. "I am. And you are the young woman who was at Fen Cross." "I am." Lady Adeline set down the pot. "Then let us not waste the morning. I know that my nephew Sabine went through a form of marriage with a companion named Fane. I have known it since the November of that year. I know that there was a child born in the March, and I know the child did not die, because I have had 4 separate people tell me it did, and none of them would look at me while they said it. And I know that the child is upstairs over a harness maker's shop in a village of 200 souls with a hole in her stocking. Do you wish to argue with any part of that?" "No," said Ilowen. "Good. Then we may proceed." She looked at Ilowen over the rim of the cup. "You have kept that child alive for 2 years, on nothing, and without once coming to this family with your hand out, and I know exactly what that cost, and there is no one else of your age and station in this kingdom who would have done it. I will not insult you by pretending otherwise. It is because I know it that I am going to make you an offer instead of a threat." The fire settled. "Give her to me." Ilowen did not move. "I will take her to London," said Lady Adeline. "I will have the marriage proved, which can be done, because I have already had the register at Fen Cross looked at. She will be Sabienne's daughter-in-law, and in fact and in the mouths of every person who matters. She will have masters, and a season, and a settlement, out of my own money, and she will marry a man who is glad of her, and nobody will ever in her whole life use the word that is being used about her in this village today. You cannot give her one of those things. And in return," said Ilowen, "you will not see her again. Not once. Not at 8 years old, and not at 18. She will be told her mother is dead, which is true, and that the woman who kept her is dead also, which will not be true, and she will grieve you for a month at 3 years old, and then she will not remember your face. That is the price, and I will not pretend it is a small one. You will be provided for, handsomely, somewhere you have not been before." Ilowen looked at the fire. "Why, the second part," she said. "Why must she not know me?" "Because while you are there, the story is there," said Lady Adeline, "and a story in a room with a girl finds its way to her sooner or later, and I have seen what that does to a girl in her third season. You are the proof, Miss Rook. Proof is what has to be got rid of." Aloan put her cup down in the saucer very carefully, and the small sound of it was the only sound in the room. "You have thought about this a great deal," she said. "I have thought about this family for 40 years. Somebody has had to. And my answer is no." Lady Adeline's expression did not change. "You have not considered it. I considered it while you were speaking. It did not take long. I promised her mother 4 days before she died that I would not give her to you. Not to a stranger. To you, by name." The old woman's hand tightened on the arm of the chair. It was the only thing about her that moved. She said that. She said that. "Well," said Lady Adeline after a moment, "she was a fool, and she was not wrong." She sat back. "Then let me tell you what your no purchase is. My nephew writes to you. Do not trouble to deny it. The whole county has it. He will go on writing until he asks you something, and he will ask. And if he marries you, here's what follows, and you had better hear it from somebody who takes no pleasure in the telling. He will not be received in 6 houses where he is received now. The child's claim will be argued in open court by men paid to say there was never any marriage at all, and it will be printed with your name in it and the words Lime Kiln in it, and in 9 years he will be old enough to read the cuttings. That is the price of your no. It is not paid by you. That is what makes it so easy to say." There was a long silence in that overheated parlor. "May I ask you one question?" Aloan said. "You may not. I will ask it anyway, and you may throw me out for it. What was his name?" Lady Adeline went absolutely still. "I beg your pardon, the man you were going to marry," said Aloan. "Before your brother's wife died and you came to this county to raise 2 boys who were not yours. There was one. I have been in 3 great houses, my lady, and there is always a woman in the top back bedroom who knows the whole of it, and cannot help telling it, and Mistress Peel is a very kind woman, and she is not a discreet one." The fire cracked. Lady Adeline Hale looked at the young woman in the mended dress for a long moment. "Get out of my parlor," she said. Aloan stood. "I am sorry," she said, and she found she meant it. "I did not ask it to wound you. I asked it because you have just told me that a woman who gives up the thing she loves in order to protect a family is doing the sensible thing. And you have been very persuasive, and I wanted to know whether you would do it again." She reached the door. "You did not answer me about the court," said Lady Adeline, without turning round. "No," said Aloan, "I did not. I do not know what to do about the court. I know that I am not going to buy that child a season by teaching her that people can be given away. Good morning, my lady." She got down the stairs and out through the inn yard and into the road before her legs began to shake, and she walked the whole length of Brackenford with them shaking, and her back straight, and she did not cry in the road, and she did not cry on the stairs, and she did not cry that night, and it was 3 days before she cried at all. And when she did, it was about something else, entirely. There was no letter that week. There was no letter the week after. Aloan counted because that is what a person does. 4 days. 6. 9. On the 11th day she took her tin down off the shelf and read the whole lot of them straight through from the hinge to the mare, and then she put them back, and she sat down on the end of the bed and told herself the truth, which was that a duke who had been shown the cost in plain figures by a woman who had spent 40 years keeping the family standing would have to be a fool to go on writing to a sewing woman over a harness-maker's shop, and that she had never once thought him a fool. On the 14th day the rent was due, and she paid it and had 4 shillings left. On the 16th day Linnet had a cough that was nothing, and Aloan sat up the whole night with her anyway. On the 19th day a letter came, and it was not from him. It was from an attorney in Carlisle, acting for a party unnamed, inviting Miss Eloan Rook to attend at an office in that city, upon a matter concerning a minor child in her care. She read it twice, and was then very sick in the basin. She did not go to Carlisle. She went to the church. It was the 1st of March, and the lane to Fen Cross had primroses in the bank of it, and she walked the 7 miles with Linnet astride her hip and the blanket bundled over one shoulder, because she had decided that whatever was coming would find her holding the proof and not hiding it. The curate was a young man with a cold who did not remember her. She asked for the register for the August of the year before last. He set it on the table and went away to blow his nose. The entry was there. It was in the old curate's hand, and it was perfectly regular, and it had her own name under it, in her own writing, 19 years old, and shaking, and underneath her signature, in ink that was not 2 years old, somebody had written the words attested true copy issued this 14th day of February, and had signed it, and beside it was the wet blue mark of a magistrate's stamp. Eloan stood with her hand flat on the page. Then she heard a horse in the lane. He was on the gray. He had come the other way from the Carlisle road, and he had been riding since before it was light, and it showed. And he pulled up at the churchyard gate and got down and stood with the reins in his hand and came no closer, and for a moment neither of them said anything at all. "You did not write," said Eloan. "No, 19 days. 21, he said. "I have been in Carlisle and in London and back at Carlisle, and I have not written because everything I had to write would have been a request, and I told you in the apple loft that I would not put a request in front of you while you were in my debt. And by the time I understood that a woman living on 4 shillings can be in a man's debt without ever having taken a penny from him, I was already in it up to the neck, and it was too late to be graceful about it. So I did the thing first, and I have come to tell you afterwards which is the wrong order, and I am aware that it is the wrong order. What thing?" He took his hat off and held it, which she had never seen him do. "I had the register proved. I did not open the hem of a blanket, and I did not ask you one question. I did not need to. Any curate keeps a book, and any man with a horse can ride to it. I have had the entry copied and sworn, and I have had it lodged in 3 places, and I have had it done in her name and her mother's name, and my brother's name, and the attorney in Carlisle is mine, and the letter you got from him was clumsy, and I have already told him so." Prosteloan's throat closed. "She is proved," he said. "Whatever happens to me, and whatever happens to you, and whatever my aunt does for the rest of her natural life, that child is Sabian Hale's lawful daughter, and there is no court in England that can be paid to say otherwise. It is done. It cannot be undone. It does not depend on you saying anything to me now or ever." He turned the hat around in his hands. "That is the whole of it. If you tell me to ride away, I will ride away, and the thing still stands." Eloan came out of the church porch and down the 2 steps into the churchyard and stopped in the middle of the path. Then she shifted Linnet onto her other arm and turned up the corner of the gray blanket and put her thumbnail into the 4 inches of newer stitching and worked the thread out of it the same way she had worked it in, on the edge of a narrow bed with an hour to spare. It gave. She shook the blanket once and caught what fell. She held it out on her flat palm. It was a plain gold ring, worn thin on one side and inside the band, small and clumsy. Somebody had scratched 2 letters and a date. "Her name was Amoret," said Eloan. "Amoret Fane. She sang badly and she kept a jackdaw, and she was married in that church on the 4th of August, and I signed the book, and her daughter is called Linnet because she was born in the morning with the birds going, and that is the first time I have said any of it out loud in 2 years." He did not take the ring. He looked at it lying on her palm, and he put his hands behind his back. "Thank you," he said. "You may take it. It is hers. For later." "Then I will keep it for her," he said. And he took it, and he did not put it in a pocket. He closed his hand around it. The curate came to the door of the church, saw the pair of them, thought better of it, and went back in. "I am not in your house," Eloan said. "I am not eating your bread. I have 4 shillings and a room of my own, and I owe you nothing, and by your own reckoning in the apple loft that means you may say whatever you came to say." He looked at her. "I did not come to say it. I came to tell you about the register. I know, she said. Say it anyway. The gray horse shook its head, and the bit rang. I have written you 13 letters, said Corvin Hale, and I have read yours until the folds went soft, and the day the post comes is now a different color from the other days, which is not a thing a sensible man says out loud. My aunt has told you what it will cost, and she will have told it accurately. It will be worse in the first year than she said, and better in the 10th than she thinks. I will not pretend to you that there is no price, because you are the last person in England who would believe me. He stopped. He seemed to be having difficulty. I have no further wish to write letters to you, he said. I want to be in the room. Eloan stood in the churchyard at Fen Cross with the child on her hip, and the empty hem hanging from the blanket, and the primroses out in the bank behind the wall. Ask me, she said, will you marry me? Not for the child, and I will say that plainly, because you will otherwise spend 40 years wondering. She is proved, and she is safe, and she does not need you to marry anybody, and not because of the river of things I owe you, because I have read every letter you ever sent me twice, and I would like to have the conversation out loud. Yes, said Eloan Rook. He crossed the ground between them. He did not take hold of her. He put one hand under the child's back to take her weight, because the child was heavy and had been on that arm for 7 miles. And he stood there, holding half of what she was carrying, and after a moment, Eloan let her head come to rest against his shoulder, and the 3 of them stood in the churchyard like that for some time, and nobody in the world saw it except a curate with a cold, watching from behind a pillar, who had the sense to say nothing about it for the rest of his life. They were married at Fen Cross in the May, in the same church and out of the same book, and the entry went in 3 lines below the other one. It was a small wedding by any measure and enormous by the measure of Brackenford. The harness maker came and brought his dog, which behaved. Mistress Peel wept from the processional to the vestry, and denied it afterwards. Nye came and stood at the back and left before the breakfast. Linnet was given a basket of petals and a firm instruction, and threw the entire basket, petals and all, at the bride, and was applauded and understood at once that the world was on her side. Lady Adeline Hale came. Nobody had thought she would. She sat in the second pew in grey, and did not sing and did not weep, and watched the whole thing with the expression of a woman auditing an account. Afterwards, in the churchyard, she came across the grass to Eloan, and stopped in front of her. I have not changed my opinion of the wisdom of this, she said. I did not expect you to. There is a house in Weardale that came to me from my mother and does nobody any good. I have put it in the child's name this week. It is not a great deal, and the roof is indifferent, and it is hers, whatever becomes of the rest of you. She looked away across the graves. His name was Reuben, she said. You asked me. It was Reuben. He went to Antigua and he did not die there, which is worse. Do not raise the subject again. She did not, and Lady Adeline never mentioned it again either, and the 2 of them arrived over the following years at something that was not warmth and was better than a truce. When a lady at a dinner in London the following winter said the word kiln in a carrying voice for the pleasure of the table, Lady Adeline Hale put down her fork and said, into a silence she had created on purpose, that her niece had been found in a lime kiln in the same way that a diamond is found in a river, and that she would be glad to explain the comparison to anyone at the table who required it. Nobody required it. The word was not used in that house again. It was 2 winters later that Eloan learned the other thing, and she learned it by accident, and it came from an old man with one eye that looked at you and one that did not. She had gone down to the kiln in the first week of December because she had got into the habit of it. She took the cart as far as the gate and carried the rest herself, and she was putting a crock of oats up onto the ledge under the oilcloth, when a voice behind her said, You will want to turn that so the lid faces out, or the damp gets under it. Quill was older and thinner, and he took the offered hand and did not take the offered money. I have wondered a long while who you were, Eloan said. I know who you are, said Quill. The whole county does. I never came up to the house because a man in my line does not go up to houses. They sat on the warm stone. She had brought bread, and he ate most of it. I have been bringing the wood since the spring, she said. I did not know who had been bringing it before, and there was nobody to ask. Quill looked at her with the eye that worked. You never asked him. Asked who? Carol, said Quill, I have used this kiln 14 winters, and I never once saw who stocked it until the year his brother died. He came in the daylight that year, which he had never done, and in a hurry, throwing wood off the back of a cart like a man late for something. And I knew the horse. Everybody in 3 parishes knows that horse. Eloan sat with the bread in her hand. He has been at it since he was a lad, said Quill. I had the rest off a carter at Ketteridge who had it off the old groom. When his grace was 14, a woman came down this road in the snow with an infant and got as far as this hollow and no further, and it was 3 days before anybody found them, and it was the boy that found them, because he was the lightest, and they sent him down the bank. He has kept a fire in this hole every winter since, and never told one living soul, and if he knew I had told you, he would not speak to me, though he never does speak to me, seeing as he has spent 14 years not noticing which of his hairs I take. The fire in the ring of stones settled and threw up a small handful of sparks. Eloan walked back up to the cart in the dusk. She thought about a night in a lime kiln with a child burning against her chest and a stack of dry beech at the back of the vault, and about the fact that the reason Linnet Hale was alive was a thing a boy of 14 had decided about the world at the bottom of a snowy bank and had gone on deciding, quietly, every winter for 21 years, without telling anybody, including his wife. She said nothing about it that night. She said nothing for 9 days. She mentioned it in the middle of December, by the fire, with the wind getting up outside and Linnet asleep 2 floors above them. Corvin, the kiln. He did not look up from his book. What of it? The wood in the kiln. There is a stack at the back, he said. There has always been a stack at the back. She waited. He turned a page, and then he did not turn another one, and after a while he set the book face down on his knee and looked into the fire, and not at her. You have been talking to that poacher, he said. I have. He is a great deal too old to be out in this weather. Corvin, yes, thank you, said Eloan. He was quiet a moment. Then he said, in a voice she had to lean towards to hear, that they had put a rope on him because he was the lightest, and that the woman had been holding the child inside her coat, and that he had understood what he was looking at before anybody could get up the bank to stop him seeing it, and that he had been 14 and had thought, standing at the bottom of that bank in the dark, that a hole in the ground with a fire in it was not very much to ask of a county. It is not, said Eloan. No, he said, it is not. That was all he ever said about it then or afterwards, and she never asked him for more, and every October a cart went down the lane to the hollow and came back empty, and nobody in 3 parishes was ever told why. Linnet Hale grew up long-legged and loud. She was told the whole truth at 11, all of it, in the library, by both of them together, because Eloan had said from the beginning that a child told the truth about herself once and properly is never afterwards at anybody's mercy. She took it well. She asked to see the register and was taken to Fen Cross, and she stood in front of her mother's name a long time and then said that she would like to learn to sing please, and had lessons for 6 years and was, everybody agreed, quite remarkably bad at it. She had called Eloan by her name until she was 4. Then one morning at breakfast she asked Mama to pass the honey, and took it and went on eating. Eloan did not correct her, and did not turn it into an occasion. She passed the honey. She went out afterwards and stood in the passage by the still room for a little while with her hand over her mouth. And then she went back in. The winters went on. Some were hard, and some were nothing at all. On the first snow of every year, whatever else was happening, Eloan Hale went down to the hollow below the beech wood with a cart and a boy to hold the horse. And she carried the wood in herself, because carrying it was the point of it. She stacked it deep in the vault where it stays driest, and checked the oilcloth on the ledge and the box with the lid, and left a crock of oats with the lid turned outward. She never once put a mark on anything, or a letter, or a name. And walking back up the field in the dark, she would think, every time, the same short thought, which was that somebody was going to come down that bank one night out of the weather, with nothing left, and would find the wood there, and would never know who left it, and would be warm. That was the whole of the arrangement. It never wanted anything else.